Our second goal is to expose the works of darkness, starting with entertainment, a device the devil uses to control your mind and soul.
Wow.
Why? Because these are the subjects that are interwoven into a lot of your entertainment. Don't let them burn.
This is Chris from Don't Let Them Burn. Welcome to our show. This is our review of the movie Venom. Now, this is a spoiler review, and it's also a Christian movie review. So, you know, this goes against the worldview of everything that's anti-biblical. So, you know, if you don't like that point of view, then, you know, it's time to back out. And if you don't like spoilers, it's also time to back out then. I mean, the movie's been out for about 3 weeks now, but we decided to do it anyway. And tonight I have a special guest with me. His name is Kevin Shrum. He's been on a couple of programs with me before. And hey, Kevin, how you doing?
Doing good, Chris. How you doing today?
I'm doing great. This is one of those movies that's timely, has made a lot of money in a time when this is one of the times of the year where Hollywood kind of dumps the garbage.
Exactly.
Also January and February, you know, those months in there. And it did well. Why? Because there's a gap in Marvel releasing movies and DC releasing movies, and it fit in perfectly. And that's one of the reasons, not the only reason, but one of the reasons why it made so much money. And of course, people are drawn nowadays to darker things in our country. And you could say globally too, but you know, just talking about Western civilization, the things we are drawn to are much darker. And you know, this Venom character is like a demon. It's put into a scientific term. It's a symbiote, which symbiote needs a host, and so do demons. So I'll let you go on before I continue.
Well, just piggybacking off what you said, Chris, the symbiote, of course, it has to have a host, but at the same time, it's feeding on its host.
Mm-hmm.
And as we saw in the film, in order to, I guess, alleviate some of its feeding on himself, Eddie Brock let it feed on another human. So we also have cannibalism in there as far as that goes.
Yeah.
And then, of course, you had some other questionable scenes as far as when the symbiote possessed Anne and ended up kissing Eddie over there. So yeah, as I was thinking about this film, I was thinking, you know, as Venom would shoot out his, I guess you would call them, he'd form some tentacles there. This movie has many tentacles as far as underlying storylines and the plots, I guess subplots that are in this film. It's just, it's hard for me to wrap my mind around everything that was going on in that film. How about you, Chris?
Well, yeah, for sure. And you know, so certain things surprised me that they put out in the film, but at the same time, let's just pull back a little bit. And for people that don't understand what is Venom, who is Venom, where it came from, well, there's a comic book called Secret Wars, and this comic book was about a god man, you know, this guy
Yes.
becoming a god. And
The Beyonder.
the Beyonder, and all the superheroes had to go on a planet to fight this Beyonder dude or whatever. I can't remember how it ended, but Peter Parker, Spider-Man, the symbiote that was on the planet lashed itself onto Peter Parker, and that's how he got the black suit back in the 80s. Okay, I think it was around 1984 or something like that.
Exactly, you're exactly right. Yeah.
Okay, so from there, you know, they had many comic books with Peter Parker, you know, dealing with the symbiote and how it would deal with him. And the symbiote, it basically feeds off of the personality. Like if it's a evil guy, it makes him more evil. You know, if it's a good guy, it'll, you know, push towards that. But it's still, you know, possessing the person. So anyway, around the time when McFarlane was doing the comic books for Marvel, Spider-Man, Ghost Rider, and a whole bunch of stuff he was doing, I believe he's the one that came up with this Venom character. And yes. This is how the character, basically the symbiote went from Spider-Man to Eddie Brock, and Eddie Brock was never a good guy. It was never somebody.
No. Yes, he's very questionable in his dealings as far as he was sort of a rival reporter there, the newspaper there against Peter Parker. So he had a hatred for Peter Parker, and that was sort of what this symbiote. That's the reason it latched onto him. It had a hatred for Spider-Man, so they had that shared in common.
Right, exactly. And later on, another character was invented, Carnage, which is like a red symbiote, and it was patterned off of the character Joker in the DC Comics universe. I can't remember the guy's name who made it up. So anyway, Carnage was worse and more powerful than Venom. And you know, the comic books go on and on and on and on, but this is all going back to demon possession and godlike creatures. They go up in tiers, and there's supposed to be many of them, and you know, you there's so many different versions of them. But anyway, go ahead.
And Carnage truly was actually more demonic in the fact that it possessed a serial killer named Cletus Cassidy, and the way it enters its host is through the blood.
Yes.
Matter of fact, Marvel has actually had recently a sort of a revival of Carnage in the fact they actually combined the Carnage symbiote with the Green Goblin to form the Red Goblin. Mm-hmm. And that's sort of how Norman Osborn became the Red Goblin. He allowed himself to be impaled in an explosion, and when his blood ran out, that's when the Carnage symbiote possessed him and became the Red Goblin. So yeah, that Carnage is definitely more on the demonic side than I guess just in your face than Venom is.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. And since it's patterned off a Joker, that's quite. If people really, look at it, it's quite obvious because the Joker is demonic. That's the doppelganger to Batman, and you notice the Joker never really dies because he's the doppelganger. He's like the yin to Batman's yang. There's a balance there, in other words. So taking the concepts from Buddhism or wherever else, that's why many characters out there, you'll see that their nemesis never dies because they have to be around, because that's the balance. So go ahead.
Yes. And then as far as you're talking about the movie adaptation, mm-hmm. There was a miniseries called Venom Lethal Protector. And I guess that's one of my reservations I had about even seeing the movie initially. I was like, how do you have Venom without having Spider-Man? And of course, we know with the Sony Marvel thing, they had to leave Spider-Man out of this one. But as this Lethal Protector series, this is where the Life Foundation comes in, mm-hmm. and the other spawns of the symbiotes. And it actually had the character Carlton Drake in it as well, as they captured Venom and spawned off the other symbiotes such as Riot off of him in that series called Venom Lethal Protector.
Yeah.
So the movie is based loosely on that one.
Right. Yes. And also, for people that don't know, Venom also, the symbiote attached itself to somebody.
Flash Thompson. That was right. Actually that was, I guess, Peter Parker's high school rival.
Yeah, and he became a spy, assassin, mercenary, supposedly a good guy, whatever, quote unquote, right? And later on, they made anti-Venom, which is basically, like I said again, the doppelganger. It will neutralize the other Venoms, and the powers or the thing they use to destroy the regular symbiote is sound and fire. The anti-Venom is totally immune to that. And so these are just little tidbits we want to give you guys so you can understand where this whole mythos comes from. But go ahead, Kevin.
And once again, speaking of Flash Thompson, he was portrayed, of course, as a disabled vet from Vietnam. And when the symbiote possessed him, it healed him. So there we have something else coming in. Not only do these symbiotes give people superhuman strength, as the maniac of Gadara in the Gospels, also heals their bodies as well. So we see this, as you mentioned, this godlike property given to these, I guess you could call them quote unquote alien creatures, and they are proposed in the movie as our saviors.
Right, but here's the thing now: what's becoming popular in our entertainment is us rooting for the bad guy. We see this in Despicable Me, Mastermind, and a few other films that have come out. Deadpool, Wolverine. These are called the anti-heroes. They're also called death dealers. Okay?
Yes.
They deal out the death and the carnage. So we're getting used to cheering for the anti-hero, the people that we wouldn't necessarily root for in a normal moral society. And I'm not talking about a Christian society, a moral society, which our Western society is moving away from now. We're going into darkness, into more sinful ways of thinking, and there's a myriad of aspects of that. But why would you root for someone that he's one of the dregs of society? He's very dishonest. He used his girlfriend to get ahead, and so on. So he's just not a good guy. They play him up in the movie like sort of a good guy because he has some attributes you can relate to, but ultimately he's not. And he teaches Venom, don't eat everybody. Don't just eat the bad guys.
Exactly.
Just murder
Some
the bad
cannibalism
guys.
is okay.
Yeah. Come on, man. So anyway,
Well, going to what you said though, I hate to interrupt you there, but while you're on that point, that is the most popular comic characters in the comic world today. Is I try to keep a pulse on the comic world. I mean, you have the Punisher from Spider-Man. You have, of course, you mentioned Wolverine. You have Deadpool, and you have the DC character called Deathstroke. All these are some of the most popular characters in comics, and as you mentioned, they're the anti-heroes now. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. These are you wouldn't want your children near these characters if they really existed,
Exactly.
So, but the idea behind these characters is what's dangerous. And we're not saying here that everybody's going to do this or do that or get drawn to this or that. But at the same time, there are people who are drawn to this dark stuff, and they're dabbling in other things too. No need to go into all that, but I'm just saying, like, some people are susceptible to these attributes, and they start to dress like them. This is what the Greeks did, and other societies did. The gods that they worship, they started to dress like them as they were depicted. So, and when you talking about fans, a fan is a fanatic. Look it up. When you become a fanatic, you start to become a worshiper. You praise and you worship these things in different forms, different means. It could be through your money, through you dressing up like them, and whatever. I mean, that could be debated all day, but I think I see it clearly. What about you, Kevin?
Yes, and if nothing else, it's the little seeds that are planted in impressionable minds of these anti-heroes and these themes that are carrying on, these common themes that are carrying on in these movies and films. Or shows and films, Netflix as well.
Yeah.
Wonderful films there.
And so, before we get into the film some more, Eminem came out with a video for this film, and it depicts the film very accurately. And at the same time, it predicts what Eminem usually promotes in his music, which is a lot of demon possession. If you listen to Eminem for any of his albums, you know that this is a theme in his music. And they seem to borrow from the movie Fallen, where the demon jumps from one person to another person. Yes. Which the demon in that movie was called Azazel, which is found in the Book of Enoch. And when he touches you, the spirit transfers into the next body or into an animal, which is actually accurate in demonology. Demons can go into animals, so it's pretty accurate stuff, and people are actually gravitated because if I was a secular person listening to Eminem's song, I would think it was a good song. It's well done, but at the same time, the influence of it is not good for anybody. Go ahead.
And speaking of the animals that I found, I guess I got a small animal rescue here at my home, but I see them. They are very spiritual creatures in the fact, as far as their senses are heightened to spiritual things.
Yeah.
And, that even goes back to the fact, you always wonder why the witch had the black cat, because the cats are sensitive to things, in the spiritual realm.
Right.
And that all ties into it.
Yeah. And it also it's so many other things too. You go into Egypt, you have depictions of half man, half animals. The cat was, up to a high level in society. You have in Hinduism and Buddhism, all those schisms over there in the East where animals are worshipped, and that goes into exercise and all that stuff. But that's another story. But we're just giving you an overview, people, for you to understand that this stuff is dangerous in so many different areas. Go ahead.
Right. Yes, and just even studying this, I found I could feel oppression, building on just in my day-to-day life, is just studying these things. As I look back on the history of Venom and watching the film, so it's something but not to be played with, for sure, in a casual manner for the Christian.
Yeah. And so in the movie now, some sort of space expedition is out there to find, there's a comet that they go to explore, and they get these spores or, symbiotes from the comet. And it's headed up by this corporation that you mentioned earlier. And something goes wrong in the ship. I guess the dude Riot got out, and the spaceship crashes on Earth. Riot escapes, but they have the other ones, and the corporation is pretty bad. They do all sorts of experiments on humans, and Eddie Brock is the one that gets to kind of unfold everything. And so, you want to say anything before I go on?
Yeah, once again, there's so many underlying subplots here and stories. The fact that they're experimenting on the homeless population.
Yeah.
Of course, we've heard of that, in the scientific community, in the news, where, it's been reported that, certain companies were actually experimenting with homeless people and actually even killing them. So as we saw, that's what the Life Foundation was doing there. Right.
So to get to that point now, we have to get into what the villain, the antagonist, what's his name again?
Carlton Drake.
He brings in one of these human experiments, and the guy gets into the chamber. He sees the symbiote. He's like, what's that? Thinking, what did I really sign up for? And he's starting to get afraid. And then this antagonist comes in and tells him about how God basically left us here alone. And when he told Abraham to sacrifice his child, that his child is the one that is the real hero. And so he twists the whole story. So I want you to get into that real quick before I go into the next thing.
Yeah, to me, this is the most disturbing part of the film. As I told you before, I'm very torn. And, if nobody has seen the movie out there, I'm glad you're listening to this. At least you can go into it with open eyes. And if you have already seen the film, just think back to what you've seen. As it still troubles me, this part is you have this Carlton Drake character, and he's almost patterned to me on Elon Musk. And of course, we see once again in the headlines today, Elon Musk, we're going to, our planets, we're destroying our planet. We need to get off of it. He's wanting to colonize Mars. Of course, you have Jeff Bezos wanting to colonize the moon. Mm-hmm. So that fits right into the story that this Drake character, he is saying that we're destroying our planet, and that God, as you mentioned, God has abandoned us. So that was the one part of the film there where that, given the reason for having the symbiotes was so that we could actually colonize space, use these symbiotes to help us get off planet or off water. And as you mentioned there, this scene here, as we see Isaac here, and as Carlton Drake confronts him, this whole idea then that he mentioned that it was Isaac that made the sacrifice and not Abraham.
Right.
And to me, that just throws in the face of not only Christianity, also Judaism, and even to, a lesser extent, maybe even Islam, because that is actually this is one of the core stories or tenets of all three of these religions, where as far as I'm looking at it as Judaism, they have what's known as the Akedah. And the Akedah was the binding of Isaac. And in Judaism, they see the binding as Isaac, as Abraham's, his test of his faithfulness, that it actually goes on and is, I guess you could say, this is passed down to his the whole Jewish nation, in the fact that his faith actually, God still looks upon this test of faith today, and will in this he will find, I guess again, he won't pour out all his wrath on the Jewish people. This is sort of, I mean, they see this as, I guess you could say, as a vicarious sacrifice, this binding of Isaac. And in this, so we find that here in this binding, as I mentioned, it's called Akedah. That's the reason they use the ram. They blow the shofar, the ram's horn there on Rosh Hashanah, because of course they found the ram there in the thicket. And so that's the Jewish point of view. And of course, Islam, they sort of have they had sort of a debate whether it was Isaac or it was really Ishmael. And of course, going back to Hebrew Orthodox Judaism, you always see, when you see the picture of Isaac tied up, he's always like a little child. But of course, we're told he's, some Jewish scholars say he was 25, some say he was even up to 37 years old when he done this.
Okay.
So he was a grown man for sure, and he went, and of course, the great test of faith for Abraham. But in Christianity, of course, we see this as a great type of Jesus Christ.
Right.
The Father and the Son and the sacrifice. And of course, we're later on told in the book of Hebrews that, he received him in a figure that Abraham knew if he was to kill his son, he had faith that God would raise him from the dead.
Right.
And because, as it was mentioned before, that when Abraham looked up to Mount Moriah, he told his servants, he said, "Stay here. I and the lad will go worship, come again to you." He had the faith that if he had to sacrifice the son, God would raise him from the dead, because he was the promised seed. And that there would not be many nations coming out of the bowels of Abraham if he was to kill his son. God had already made the promise, and that's where the faith stepped in. God had made the promise that he was going to make Abraham's descendants as the sand of the sea and the stars of the sky for multitude. So he knew if he had to kill Isaac up there on Mount Moriah, that God would have to raise him from the dead to keep his promise. So that's where the faith come in, and the great, as we're told, Abraham is called the friend of God. Right. But in this twisting of the story, Isaac becomes the one who made the sacrifice, because, and in that, it becomes now the father, I guess you could see the twisted view, the fatherhood of God and the brotherhood of man portrayed in this, that man becomes the savior. No longer is God the savior, it's man. And man, with the help of these symbiotes, or even if you want to call them demons,
right,
that they are saving themselves.
Yeah.
So that, to me, is that underlying, and that's what really, really bothered me about this film.
Right. And if you notice, first of all, I mean, we didn't mention the word blasphemy, but that's what it is, right?
Yes.
And this dude, right after he gave his speech, he literally declares himself as God.
Yes.
To this guy. And of course, the guy gets sacrificed. So here goes this is this I am thing again. But that's riddled throughout a lot of the Marvel movies. And even though this is a Sony project, not necessarily a Marvel Disney project, it's still the same theme, Right.
But this, to me, this is more in your face than any of the rest.
Yeah, it's really, it really is. Now, this jumps to another part of the movie where Eddie is in his apartment and I believe he's already possessed by the symbiote, right?
Yes.
And he goes to meditate and he puts on Eckhart Tolle. If you don't know who Eckhart Tolle is, if I'm even pronouncing it right, I think it's Eckhart Tolle, right? He is a big New Age writer. Oprah has showed this guy off many times on her show and, you know, on her programs on the internet. And he's a dangerous dude to listen to. And
Yes.
this guy is ready to go meditate with this dude in his ear. And the funny thing is, like, in the middle of all this is when he gets his manifestation of Venom. But this is a deep connection in the New Age, because you not meditate on something, you empty your mind to get basically into another state of consciousness. There's many ways to do this, including yoga and other stuff. Long story. And what it does is it yokes you to the spirits.
Your spirit guide, exactly.
Your spirit guide or spirit guides, right? And that's when they manifest. So this is very crucial for you to understand about this movie. They're teaching you New Age doctrine. And anyone that's in the New Age know that what we're saying right now is very on point, okay? Very accurate. So that's
I guess Pastor Billy would agree wholeheartedly on this one.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah. So this is when I was watching the movie, I didn't really expect this to be in there. I just, you know, regular superhero movie, anti-hero, but this was huge to such a degree that I was like, wow, whoa, I gotta write this one down, because they mentioned the dude by name. You know, usually they bring in some New Age subject matter and they leave it as that without telling you what it really is. And here they're projecting the author on you. It's really interesting to me, and many people, I'm pretty sure, just went over their heads. But why would they do that? Because many people are now into this Eastern mysticism, the yoga, Hinduism, same thing, two different words, same thing. The Buddhism and all these Eastern mystical stuff. So guess what? They'll be like, oh, I'll check that out because look, he's meditating. I'll go check out Eckhart Tolle's CDs, MP3s, whatever, books. It's an advertisement is what I'm saying to you.
It is.
I can't really say it much clearer than that. It's an advertisement. Go ahead.
Yes, and as you got the anti-God, you have the New Age. And then, of course, then you have the fact that these symbiotes are, to me, you just can't get around the comparison to demon. You know, I've seen a guy on YouTube, you know, you're calling Venom a demon. He's just blasting folks for doing that. Yeah. But how can you miss the comparison, especially, you know, the statement, we are Venom, sounds just like the man over there in Mark chapter 5, we are Legion. There it is. It's in your face again. Yeah. There he's combined the symbiosis with his creature, and the fact that he then, as the Drake, Carlin Drake thinks that these are our saviors, but then in the end they turn out they were going to be our destroyers. Right. As they were coming back to destroy all of humanity.
Exactly. And the parallel to the Bible is so in your face. Because Satan is a murderer from the beginning, the father of lies. He wants you dead. And so does his minions. And so they've been leading humanity for a while now into the age that we're about to get into, where the Antichrist and all this stuff, through different means, and automatic writing and all this stuff, technology and certain other things. So why would they be leading us to this, to where these developers of AI are saying the ancient ones want us to build AI so they can come and inhabit it? Right. What we're saying is not craziness. And if you don't believe there's a real devil, especially if you're a Christian and don't believe that, there is a problem. If you don't believe, then, you know, it's just like, you know, if you believe if you believe Jesus is a savior, if you believe God is real, there is an opposite. And we're not talking about in power. There's no opposite to God in power. He's all power. But as far as the battle, there is a rebellion. Right. By Satan. Yes. And they don't want you. They want to destroy you. So this movie is giving you that picture, that motif that's been around for centuries. But yet too, also painting, sorry to interrupt, but painting the picture that we can somehow peacefully coexist with these forces that would like to destroy us. And that's all part of that's the whole mindset of people that are involved in the occult.
They think that they somehow can coexist with Satan and the demons and somehow control them, but in the end, they're going to destroy you.
Right.
Take you to hell.
Yeah. It's so, well, you know what? That piggybacks onto what you mentioned earlier about, you see this in, there's so many sci-fi movies and comic book movies. We're destroying the earth. We're overpopulated. We got to get out of here. Gaia, blah, blah, blah. And this movie carries the same theme.
Yes.
Why is it everywhere? But again, this Eastern thought has invaded our entertainment. It's been invaded for a while, since the 60s, 70s, you know, but now it's more prevalent, and this goes into the EPA and global government and United Nations. Too much to talk about. But this is a way to get you guys into the global brain, into the one mindset that God, even in Revelation, says he puts into the leaders of the world to basically carry out his plan. They think they're carrying out their plan, but they're really carrying out God's plan. So just be aware when you hear all this stuff about environmentalism and taking care of the planet and all this stuff, it's really another way of saying one world government, one world religion, and all this stuff that's coming. Go ahead.
Right. And I have no disagreement to say we live on a dying planet. Mm-hmm. We are on a dying planet. Mm-hmm. But God is going to burn this thing up, as we're told in 2 Peter. This thing's going to melt with fervent heat. Mm-hmm. There's nothing we can do to stop it.
Right.
Man is not going to somehow save this planet. Mm-hmm. And but that's, once again, we're looking away from God, the Creator, and we're looking to ourselves as the Savior. And then even calling upon these evil entities to help us.
Yeah, absolutely.
In our saving of ourselves.
Yes. You know, going towards the end of the movie, right? Venom also possesses Eddie Brock's girlfriend. And here's the thing. This woman was against the whole thing at first, right? Then she slowly warms up to it. Then he possesses her. To bring in the part of the climax of the movie, but when he does it and he releases her and go back into Eddie, she has nothing bad to say. He's like, oh, it just happened, you know. So you're not getting a balanced view here, and on top of that, Venom also resurrected Eddie.
Yes.
When what's the other symbiote's name? Riot.
Right.
Riot basically killed Eddie. And he got resurrected. So it's really showing some real strong spiritual connotations, subject matter that most people are just unaware of. And unfortunately, a lot of people that go to movies are unsaved. And, you know, and I'm not saying all, you know, because obviously Christians go and see the movies too. But the thing is, it's planting seeds in your mind to reject Jesus Christ.
Yes, they wrap it in this anti-hero motif, as you said, mm-hmm. and people, I think it goes over a lot of folks' head. And as you was talking about the end of the movie, there's another disturbing part there at the end where Eddie and Ann are discussing what happened, and as we hear Venom's voice again, we thought Venom was gone, and then we see that he's back with Eddie, mm-hmm. and they're discussing the fact that, you know, they kind of felt strange about it, but they lack the power.
Exactly.
And there's another drawing point of the occult. Mm-hmm. People are put off by it at first when they look at it, but then they're drawn to it by the promise of giving them power.
Absolutely.
They're at the end again. Yes.
Absolutely. And hasn't man been looking for immortality and power since the beginning, since the garden?
Yes.
Right? And technically, you know, we could debate that we already had it because we were there with Jesus Christ in the garden, tree of life right there, right?
Right.
And once we broke that and basically disregarded what God said, now we're in a perpetual state of death. Right? Yes.
So that's the whole thing. Man is chasing deification. With the AI, they're chasing deification.
Right.
That was what Satan come and said. You shall be as gods. Yeah. And that's the lie that man still believes today, that they can become a god and they can be immortal without Jesus Christ.
So
I want to go make one thing. I just hope people don't understand me when I said to be as gods and immortal without Jesus Christ. I'm not saying we're going to be a god with Jesus Christ, but he does make us immortal in the fact that we won't die the second death. I just want to make sure nobody misunderstood that statement.
Okay.
I sort of piggybacked as I was saying that. I was like, no, Jesus Christ is God.
Mm-hmm.
And but we will be made a new creature, a new creation. And we will be immortal and have everlasting life, but we won't be a god. But that is what man is chasing.
Right.
They want to be a god outside of and without having anything to do with God. They want to be their own God and have control of their own life and not submit to the creator of the universe.
Exactly. And it's good that you clarified that, because, you know, the Mormons think that they're going to become gods.
And, I gotta check in my spirit as soon as I said that. Go back and clarify that.
Exactly. And, you know, before we wrap it up, we really have to hone in on these subjects when we go to these movies to see what are we being taught. Not just adults, but the children. People are bringing their children to see these movies. And what are your children being taught? Does it mean that every child will turn to a certain... No, it doesn't mean that. But entertainment is a very huge form of indoctrination. No matter if it's good or bad, a very huge form. Hitler used it. Many people use it. And of course, Hollywood is using it. China has bought out a lot of Hollywood, and they're using it. You don't see it like how I probably see it, but once you understand what's going on in the world political system, you'll see what I'm talking about.
Comics were on the forefront of propaganda during World War II.
Oh yeah,
that's where Captain America and a lot of the other cartoon characters were used, you know, to try to win the support for the war.
Yes, exactly. And it all worked, even with feminism. You know,
yes.
Wonder Woman is the poster child still of feminism in the comic books. And that's a whole nother show right there. So, yeah. So there's a lot we could talk about more. But if you've gained anything from this, share it with your friends, share it with your family, educate people about this movie and other movies. We have plenty of movie reviews on our channel, and most of our movie reviews are about exposing what's in the movies, not really, you know, praising the movie. And you know, the movie was done well. The CGI was okay, and you know, whatever. It's entertainment. However, the subject matter is what people need to hone in on. There are like 3, 4, 6 different tiers of messages coming towards you. And most of it is evil. So
yeah, this is one of the multi-tiered, as far as the messages embedded. One of the multi-tiered movies I've seen, or plots come out that Marvel has made so far. I guess some of Marvel, so whatever combination. However you want to say that, I don't. I don't know how they splitting that out.
Yeah, well, we know that a lot of these directors and writers, they're into some stuff. Some aren't. Some are. And, you know, for them to be so precise, they had to do some research, or they have to know some knowledge, or somebody paid them to do something. So we don't have all the information, but we are sure that that's what's going on. So anyway, this is the end of our review of Venom. Anything else you would like to add, Kevin?
No, as I just mentioned, you know, anybody wanting to see that, just just keep these things in mind, that it is dark, and if you, especially, you know, if you're taking children to see this, you know, you may want to discuss with them, you know, what's being said in this film. Absolutely.
And don't forget, you know, the youth are very susceptible to a lot of these things. And then we're not talking about 3-year-olds. We're talking about from little babies all the way up to 16, 20 years old. They're very susceptible because their minds are still being formed in a certain way towards ideals and spiritual ideals and everything else. So don't forget to preach the gospel to your friends and everybody else. Jesus Christ is the only thing that matters in the end. And
amen.
We just want to, make that clear. And thank you for listening. This is Chris from Don't Let Them Burn. It's Kevin Shrum, my guest. And remember, don't let them burn.
If you like our videos, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and the notification bell to get all our frequent updates.